They said miracles don't happen anymore. But that winter at Bitterroot Lake proved them wrong. A broken veteran, haunted by his past. A loyal German shepherd, scarred but unyielding. And a little girl, lost for a year beneath the snow. When faith met courage, something divine happened. This isn't just a rescue. It's a story about God's quiet hand, about love that refuses to give up. Stay with us to the end, and if you believe in second chances, in hope, in miracles, subscribe now and join our family of hearts that still believe. The wind scraped across the frozen Montana Valley like a blade of ice, whispering through pine needles heavy with snow. The world was white and silent, except for the faint creak of an old cabin, standing stubbornly against the cold, smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, Jack Turner sat alone at his small wooden table, the soft crackle of the fire, the only sound that reminded him he was still alive. Jack was 47, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of body built by labor and survival rather than vanity. His dark hair was flecked with early gray, cropped short out of old habit. A thin scar ran from his right temple to the edge of his jaw, a souvenir from a roadside bomb in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. His beard was a rough shadow of neglect, streaked with silver. His eyes, steel blue and sharp when alert, hollow when lost in thought, carried the quiet weight of someone who had seen too much and talked about too little. He poured himself another cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The mug trembled slightly in his calloused hand. It wasn't the cold. It was the same tremor that came every morning before dawn, before he managed to convince himself the war was over. But, in truth, it never really ended. It just followed him home, invisible and patient. At his feet lay Rex, a 9-year-old German shepherd, once a military working dog, and now the only living creature Jack truly trusted. Rex was large and strong even for his breed, his fur a mix of black and tan, with a silver muzzle showing his age. His right ear was torn slightly at the tip, a scar from shrapnel years ago, and his eyes, dark amber and unblinking, carried the same haunted alertness as his master. He was loyal, silent, and always watching. Jack had found Rex again 2 years after they both left the army. The dog had been retired from service, listed for adoption, his file marked with aggressive tendencies. Jack had driven 3 states just to take him home. Since then, they had lived together in the same quiet rhythm. Long walks through the woods at dawn, simple meals, restless nights. Outside, the snow thickened. The trees bent under its weight, and the world disappeared into a white blur. Jack leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. But the moment he did, the memory came uninvited. Sandstorms, screams, the sharp metallic scent of blood. He jolted awake, gasping, heart hammering. Rex lifted his head instantly, ears pricked, eyes searching Jack's face. "I'm fine, boy," Jack muttered, though his voice cracked on the word fine. He reached down to scratch Rex behind the ear. Just a dream, just another damn dream. When the shaking passed, Jack pulled on his worn leather jacket and heavy boots. He needed air, movement, distraction. The cabin felt smaller every winter, the walls closing in like a coffin. He clipped Rex's leash, though both knew it was mostly symbolic. Rex didn't need one. The two stepped, outside into the biting cold, snow crunching beneath their boots and paws. The trail behind the cabin wound deep into the pine forest, a narrow path that Jack had walked so many times he could follow it blindfolded. It was his therapy, his ritual. The forest, at least, didn't lie or judge. It only watched. But today something felt wrong. The quiet was heavier, the stillness thicker. Even the birds were silent. Half a mile down the path, Rex stopped suddenly. His body went rigid, tail straight, nose lifted into the wind. A low growl rumbled in his chest, deep, primal, unmistakable. Jack froze. That sound wasn't random. It was the same growl Rex had used once in Kandahar, seconds before their convoy hit an ambush. Jack's instincts flared awake. His breath steamed in the air as he scanned the tree line. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Rex moved forward a few steps, nose low to the ground, sniffing with fierce concentration. Then Jack saw it, faint tire tracks pressed into the snow, leading off the main path toward the old Deer Hollow hunting lodge, a place that had been abandoned since the owner died 5 years back. Locals said it was haunted, though Jack didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in people, and people were usually worse. He crouched beside the tracks. They were fresh, maybe a few hours old. A large vehicle, heavy tread, possibly a van or truck. That was strange. No one came out here in winter, especially not up the steep dirt road that froze over this time of year. Rex sniffed the air again and gave a sharp bark, the kind that made Jack's heart drop. The same bark that once meant danger. 3 short, 1 long. Jack felt his pulse quicken. "Easy," he said, though his own voice betrayed unease. Probably just hunters. But he knew better. Hunters didn't drive this far off-road. Hunters didn't hide their tire marks under fallen branches. Someone had been trying not to be found. Jack hesitated, mind battling the instinct to investigate against the exhaustion of years spent chasing shadows. "Not my problem," he muttered, pulling on Rex's leash. "Come on, let's go home." Rex didn't move. His growl deepened, muscles tensing under his fur. He stared into the woods, tail stiff, every inch of him alive with warning. Jack followed his gaze but saw nothing, only snow and trees dissolving into mist. Then, faintly through the hush of falling snow, he heard it. A sound so small he thought at first it was the wind, but it wasn't the wind. It was the unmistakable sound of someone crying. A child. Jack's breath caught. He looked down at Rex, who was already facing the direction of the sound, ears erect, trembling with tension. "No," Jack whispered to himself. "Don't start this. You're hearing things." But the cry came again, sharper this time, muffled as if from under the earth. It pierced something inside him that had been buried for years. The memory of another child's cry, long ago, in a burning Afghan village. The memory he had spent years trying to drown in whiskey and silence. He clenched his fists. "It's nothing," he said aloud, though his voice trembled. "Just the wind, damn it." Rex barked once more and bolted into the trees. "Rex!" Jack shouted, running after him. Branches whipped against his jacket. Snow exploded underfoot. The forest blurred around him as he stumbled through drifts, lungs burning. "Rex, heel!" The command that had always worked, always, was ignored. Rex disappeared through a thicket, barking furiously. Jack pushed through after him, panting, and stopped short. Before him lay the Deer Hollow Lodge, half buried in snow. The building's windows were boarded, the roof sagging under ice, but smoke curled faintly from the rusted chimney. Someone was inside. Rex stood near the front steps, hackles raised, growling low. Jack crouched beside him, heart thundering. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to call the sheriff, to let someone else handle it. But deep down, he already knew he wouldn't. For years he had walked away. From people, from hope, from the part of himself that once believed he could still do good. But the sound of that child's cry wouldn't let him walk away again. He swallowed hard. "All right, partner," he murmured. "Let's see what the hell's going on." The wind howled through the trees, carrying flakes like shards of glass. The light was fading fast, turning the snow blue-gray, like the world was holding its breath. Jack took one cautious step toward the cabin. From somewhere beneath the structure, he heard the cry again, clearer now, desperate, human. Rex barked once, sharp and decisive. Jack drew a deep breath, adrenaline drowning his hesitation. He had been a soldier long enough to know what fear was, but this felt different. This wasn't fear of dying. This was fear of failing again, of being too late. He stepped closer to the building, snow crunching beneath his boots, the scent of burning wood mixing with something else, something metallic. Blood, maybe? Rex moved ahead, nose to the ground, tail low, body rigid. Jack reached for the handle of his old hunting knife, the one he kept for cutting ropes and skinning deer. The air was colder now, heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, from the shadow under the porch, came a sound that froze Jack where he stood. A soft, trembling voice, barely above a whisper. "Help me." Jack's pulse exploded. He looked down at Rex. The dog's eyes met his, steady and waiting. Jack Turner, soldier, survivor, broken man, took one more step forward into the unknown, unaware that this single moment would change everything that was left of his life. Jack crouched near the porch of the Deer Hollow Lodge, his breath a pale ghost in the frigid air. The sound had come again, a weak, shivering whisper. "Help me." The snow muffled everything but that plea. Rex stood rigid beside him, hackles raised, nose pressed toward the wooden floorboards. Jack brushed snow aside with his gloved hand, finding a narrow seam in the ground, a wooden hatch half buried under ice and dead leaves. A faint draft of cold air seeped through, carrying the smell of rust and damp earth. His pulse hammered. Someone was trapped down there. He jammed his knife into the frozen edge and pried until the wood cracked open. Beneath the hatch was a small steel door, bolted from the outside with a thick chain and padlock. Frost lined the hinges. Rex whined low, pacing. Jack's fingers shook as he worked the lock with his knife blade, the metal biting through his gloves. It finally gave with a dull snap. The door creaked open, exhaling a breath of air so cold it burned his throat. A narrow stairway led down into darkness. "Stay close," he whispered. Rex descended first, tail low, moving silently despite his size. Jack followed, boots thudding against frozen steps. The dim light of his phone illuminated concrete walls slick with ice. In the corner sat a metal cage, and inside it, curled up under a filthy blanket, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her hair, once golden, was matted into knots. Her face was pale beneath a layer of grime, and her eyes, wide, terrified blue, blinked at the sudden light. She wore a pink pajama top, patterned with faded unicorns, now torn and stiff from the cold. When she saw Jack, she flinched backward, pressing against the cage bars. "It's okay," Jack said softly, his voice steady, though his heart was not. "I'm here to help you." The girl shook her head, lips quivering. "He'll come back," she whispered. "He said he'll come back when it's dark." Jack's chest tightened. "Who?" She pointed weakly toward the stairs. "The man. He brings food. He locks me in again." Jack forced the cage door open with a grunt, the hinges shrieking in protest. The girl flinched at the sound, then froze when Rex stepped closer. The dog lowered his head and sniffed gently, tail wagging once. Something in his calm presence seemed to reassure her. "What's your name?" Jack asked, crouching so his voice met her at eye level. "Mia," she said after a pause. "Mia Collins." Jack nodded slowly, forcing warmth into his tone. "All right, Mia. My name's Jack, and this is Rex. We're going to get you out of here." Her eyes flicked to his scar, to the rugged lines of his face. He knew what she saw: a stranger, unshaven, heavy boots, a voice too rough for comfort. He softened it. "You're safe now. Do you believe me?" She hesitated, then nodded, eyes welling with silent tears. He wrapped her in his thick jacket, lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. "We're leaving," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Now." They climbed the stairs quickly. The hatch above groaned as Jack pushed it open, light spilling over them. The snow outside had thickened, falling in heavy sheets. Rex darted ahead, scanning the tree line, his instincts on high alert. Jack glanced at his phone. No signal, not even a flicker. He cursed under his breath. He turned back to Mia, who clung to his shoulder. "Mia, do you remember where you're from?" She nodded weakly. "Idaho. Mommy was getting gas, and then a man took me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Jack's jaw tightened. Idaho was nearly 200 miles away. Whoever took her had driven through 2 states, off main roads, to hide her here. "All right," he murmured. "We're going to get you home." He adjusted her weight, scanning the road. The tracks he'd seen earlier were now half covered by snow, but new ones, deeper and fresher, cut across them. His stomach sank. Someone was coming back. Rex's growl confirmed it. A low, rolling engine sound echoed faintly through the trees. Jack turned toward the main road, where a pair of headlights flickered through the snowfall, growing brighter. "Damn it!" he muttered. "They're back." He glanced at the cabin. No time to hide inside. Too exposed. He spotted a slope behind the lodge, half covered in brush and fallen logs. "Come on, boy," he whispered. Rex followed immediately as Jack carried Mia down the hill, slipping on ice, the wind biting through his shirt. The girl's arms clung tight around his neck. They ducked behind an overturned truck half buried in snow. The old Ford must have been abandoned years ago, but its rusted shell was enough cover. Jack set Mia down gently and placed a finger over his lips. "Quiet now!" The rumble of the truck grew louder. Through the cracks of the old metal, Jack saw a white van roll into the clearing, headlights sweeping over the cabin. It stopped near the door. Two men stepped out. The first was tall and broad, wearing a heavy brown coat and black gloves. His hair was cut close to the scalp, and a jagged scar ran across his cheek, an old wound poorly stitched. His movements were slow but deliberate, the kind of man who knew violence and wasn't afraid of it. The second was smaller, maybe in his 30s, with thinning blonde hair and jittery hands that betrayed nervous energy. He kept glancing around like he was being watched. "Keep it quick," the tall man said, voice deep and steady. "We're leaving tonight." Jack's pulse spiked. The girl had been right. They were planning to move her again. Rex pressed against Jack's leg, muscles quivering. The big dog's body language screamed for permission to act, but Jack held him back with a soft touch. Not yet. He had no weapon, no backup, only instinct. The smaller man opened the hatch, peering down. "She's gone," he hissed. "What?" The tall one stomped over, bent to look. "No way! The chain—" "It's broken. Find her." They split up, flashlights slicing through the trees. Jack ducked lower, shielding Mia with his body. She trembled, face buried against his shoulder. He whispered, "It's okay. Stay still." A beam of light swept dangerously close, passing over the wreck's edge. Rex growled softly, throat vibrating like a coiled spring. Jack held his collar tight. Then, from the woods beyond, came a crack, the sound of ice snapping under weight. Both men turned their lights that way. "Over there!" shouted the smaller one, sprinting toward the sound. The taller man followed. Jack seized the moment. "Now, Rex!" he whispered. They bolted the opposite direction, through knee-deep snow, hearts pounding. Behind them, the men's shouts grew fainter, swallowed by the storm. Rex ran ahead, cutting a path, his black coat nearly invisible in the darkness. When they finally reached the road, Jack spotted the faint outline of his truck. Old, dented, but loyal, just like him. He shoved Mia inside, started the engine, and gunned it toward the mountain road. Snow sprayed behind the tires as they disappeared into the night. Snow whipped across the mountain road, turning the night into a storm of ghosts. Jack's old truck rattled over the frozen ground, tires groaning as he gripped the wheel tight, one eye on the rearview mirror. Mia sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, her small hands clutching Rex's fur in silent terror. The German shepherd panted softly, steam rising from his muzzle, every muscle alert. Jack's chest tightened at the sound of her trembling breath. "You're safe now," he said, though he didn't believe it himself. The headlights behind them proved him right, two white beams cutting through the snow, gaining fast. "Damn it!" He floored the gas. The truck roared in protest, but obeyed. Rex barked once, deep and sharp, his warning tone. "I see them," Jack muttered. "Hold on." He veered off the road, headlights off, sliding down an old logging trail that twisted through the trees. Snow flew up like mist as the truck bumped violently. Mia cried out. "I'm sorry, kiddo," he said. "Almost there." The trail ended near an old ranger station, long abandoned, its roof half collapsed under snow. He cut the engine. The silence after the noise was deafening. The distant rumble of the pursuing truck grew louder, closer. Jack turned to Mia. "We need to hide. You stick close to Rex. Don't make a sound. You hear me?" She nodded, eyes wide, pale as the snow outside. They slipped into the tree line. The forest was a maze of white shadows and black trunks. Jack crouched behind a fallen pine, scanning the road below. Two vehicles appeared through the blizzard, the white van and, behind it, a dark SUV. The van door opened first. A figure stepped out, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat, the same scarred man from before. But the man who emerged from the SUV made Jack's blood freeze. He knew that face. Derek Cole. 10 years ago, they'd served together in the same unit in Afghanistan. Derek had been the unit's demolitions expert, lean, wiry, with dark hair and a crooked grin that never reached his eyes. Even back then, there was something off about him. Too calm under chaos, too comfortable with pain. After their convoy was ambushed, Derek had vanished during the retreat. Weeks later, the Army reported him dishonorably discharged, theft of weapons, suspected desertion. Jack had buried the memory with the rest of his ghosts. Until now. Derek stepped into the snow, flashlight cutting arcs through the storm. His face was gaunt now, eyes hollowed by years of violence and self-destruction. A thin beard lined his jaw, streaked with gray. His breath fogged as he muttered to the others, voice low but sharp. They couldn't have gone far. The tracks are fresh. Check the ridge. The other two men, the scarred one and the nervous blonde, spread out. Derek's voice carried authority. He was the one in charge. Jack felt the old anger ignite. The same man who'd betrayed their unit was now hunting children for profit. He motioned to Rex. The dog crouched beside him, silent, eyes locked on the intruders. Jack whispered, "We end this, partner, just like old times." The wind howled louder, masking his movement as he circled through the trees. His mind shifted back into soldier mode, calculating distances, angles, timing. He found a half-frozen creek and planted himself behind a boulder, pulling a small metal rod from his jacket. An emergency flare. Improvised weapons were all he had left. The scarred man wandered closest, rifle slung lazily across his chest. Jack snapped the flare open. It hissed and burst into red light. The man spun toward it, momentarily blinded. Jack tackled him into the snow, striking fast and silent. The man's rifle clattered away. Within seconds, he was unconscious. Jack dragged him behind a tree and took the weapon. But the light had given away their position. A gunshot cracked through the night, snow exploding near his head. Derek's voice shouted, "Found them! The girl's here!" Rex lunged from the shadows, teeth bared, slamming into the smaller blond man, who screamed as the dog pinned him down. Jack fired back at Derek, the muzzle flash bright against the storm. Bullets shredded bark beside him. The smell of gunpowder mixed with pine and cold air. "Mia, stay down!" Jack yelled, ducking behind a log. He heard her sobbing softly somewhere behind Rex. Then Rex yelped, a sharp gutting sound, and stumbled, his right shoulder bleeding. "Rex!" Jack's heart clenched. Rage replaced fear. He rose from cover, firing 2 controlled shots. One hit Derek's rifle, knocking it aside. The other grazed his thigh. Derek cursed, limping but defiant. "Still playing hero, huh, Turner?" he shouted. "You should have stayed dead like the rest of them." Jack gritted his teeth. "You first." They clashed in the snow, 2 ghosts of a forgotten war. Derek swung a knife. Jack blocked, countered, drove his elbow into Derek's ribs. The years melted away. Training, instinct, brutality. The fight was close, desperate. Then Derek slipped, falling into the creek. The shock of icy water stunned him just long enough for Jack to kick the knife away. Rex, limping, stood beside Jack, teeth bared despite the blood staining his fur. Jack aimed the rifle. "It's over, Cole. You're done." But Derek only smiled, that same crooked grin. "You never understood, did you? The war didn't end. It just changed employers." Before Jack could respond, Derek dove into the freezing current, vanishing beneath the broken ice. The sound of rushing water swallowed him whole. Silence followed. Only wind and Rex's labored breathing remained. Jack dropped the rifle and fell to his knees beside Rex. "Easy, boy. You're all right." He pressed his hand against the wound. Blood darkened the snow. Rex whined softly but licked Jack's wrist, refusing to give in. Mia appeared from behind a tree, face streaked with tears. "Is he going to die?" she whispered. Jack met her eyes, the same terrified blue he'd seen in every lost child overseas. "No," he said firmly, "not tonight." He tore off his sleeve, bound the wound, and hoisted Rex into his arms. His own leg throbbed. A bullet had grazed his calf, but he forced himself to move. "We've got to find shelter." Through the snowstorm, he saw a faint light flickering on a distant hill. A house. Hope. "Come on, Mia." She took his hand. Together, limping and shivering, they disappeared into the white night, leaving the wreckage of old ghosts behind. The first light of morning broke through the storm like a blade, turning the snow into a blinding mirror. Jack limped up the narrow road, every step a struggle. Rex leaned against his leg, his injured shoulder wrapped in a strip of torn fabric that was already soaked through with blood. Mia held Jack's hand tightly, her face pale, eyes glassy with exhaustion. When she pointed ahead, her voice was barely a whisper. "There's smoke up there." Through the drifting snow, A small farmhouse came into view, paint peeling, roof patched, but with a faint, warm glow from a window. Jack's chest tightened in both relief and fear. He knew that house. It belonged to Emily Hayes, the one person in town who hadn't looked at him like he was crazy. Emily was a woman in her early 40s, tall and strong in the quiet way of someone used to doing things alone. Her chestnut hair was usually tied back in a loose braid, and her skin bore the faint tan of someone who worked outdoors even in winter. Years of caring for others, her students, her son, and once her late husband, had carved soft lines of fatigue around her green eyes, but they still held warmth. Jack had fixed her truck once, months ago, and they'd talked about little things, weather, books, nothing personal, but she'd looked at him with the kind of patience most people didn't have anymore. He staggered up to the porch and knocked. The door opened moments later, and Emily stood there, wrapped in a faded red sweater, her expression shifting from confusion to shock when she saw the scene. The blood, the trembling girl, the dog barely standing. "Jack Turner," she breathed. "What on earth?" "No time," Jack said hoarsely. "We need help, please." Emily stepped aside without another word. The warmth of the house hit like a wave. She guided them to the couch near the fireplace. Mia clung to Rex, who collapsed onto the rug, breathing heavily. Emily knelt beside him, her hands gentle but steady. "What happened?" "Long story," Jack said, sinking into a chair. "Bad men, they're coming back." Emily's jaw set. "I'll call the sheriff." "Don't!" His tone was sharp enough to stop her mid-step. "You can't trust them. At least one of them's involved." Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. "Then I'll call state police." Jack nodded weakly. "FBI, if you can reach them." While Emily hurried to the kitchen phone, Jack examined Rex's wound more closely. The bleeding had slowed, but his fur was matted with dark red. He whispered, "Hang in there, buddy." Rex looked up at him, tail giving one faint thump. Emily returned. "State dispatch is sending agents. They said they're coordinating with federal units. Might take an hour with the storm." Jack exhaled. "That's time we might not have." As she knelt beside him with a first aid kit, Emily glanced at his leg. "You're bleeding too." "It's nothing. Don't give me that." She tore his pant leg open, revealing a graze seeping through his makeshift bandage. "You men always think you're indestructible." He almost smiled. "I used to be, not anymore." She cleaned the wound efficiently, hands moving with the calm of someone who'd seen blood before. Her husband, Daniel, had been a firefighter, killed in a warehouse collapse 5 years earlier. Jack remembered reading about it in the local paper. Maybe that's why she understood broken people. She'd been one once. When Mia finally spoke, her voice was small. "Miss Emily?" Emily turned, her tone instantly softer. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we safe here?" Emily reached over, brushed the girl's tangled hair. "You are now." Jack looked away, the words hitting something inside him. He'd promised that before, to soldiers, to children overseas, and failed more times than he could count. Outside, the sound of an approaching engine shattered the moment. Jack moved to the window, hand on the rifle he'd taken from the thugs. A black SUV crawled up the road, tires crunching the snow. "They found us," he muttered. Emily's face drained of color. "That's Sheriff Dalton's car." Jack stiffened. "Dalton?" She nodded. "He's the county sheriff." Jack's memory flashed. Dalton, tall and broad, with a trimmed gray beard and the smug confidence of a man who liked power. He'd been the one who'd written Jack up years ago for disturbing the peace when he'd broken up a bar fight. The same man who'd testified against him in a VA complaint that cost him a job offer. When Dalton stepped from the SUV, Jack saw that nothing about him had changed. Same thick frame, same self-satisfied grin. But this time, his eyes flicked to the rifle in Jack's hand and to Mia behind him. "Morning, Turner," Dalton drawled. "Looks like you've got yourself in some trouble." "Stay where you are," Jack warned. Dalton raised a brow. "Easy now, you don't want to make this worse." Emily stepped between them. "Sheriff, this man saved a child. She was kidnapped." "I'm aware," Dalton interrupted, voice tightening. "We've been looking for her. I'll take it from here." Jack saw the lie in his eyes. "You're part of it," he said quietly. "Aren't you?" Dalton's smile vanished. His hand drifted toward his sidearm. You don't know what you're talking about? Yeah, I do. You covered for Cole. You ran protection for the ring. That's why the FBI's coming, isn't it? Someone finally talked. The sheriff's eyes hardened. You should have stayed out of this, soldier. Before he could draw, a sharp crack echoed from the distance. A rifle shot. The bullet shattered the SUV's mirror. Another shot followed, forcing Dalton to dive for cover. Jack grabbed Emily and Mia, pulling them to the floor. They're still out there! Rex barked once, low but fierce, dragging himself to his feet despite the pain. Minutes later, the sound of sirens grew through the storm. Several vehicles this time. A convoy of dark sedans with blue lights flashing crested the hill. Dalton's face twisted in panic as FBI agents poured out, weapons raised. Sheriff William Dalton, a woman's voice commanded through a bullhorn, step away from your vehicle. The sheriff froze. Jack looked toward the voice and saw Agent Claire Monroe, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features framed by short blonde hair. Her expression was focused, eyes steel gray behind the falling snow. She moved with authority, her navy coat marked with the yellow FBI insignia. We've been monitoring your frequency, she said as she approached. Mr. Turner, you've done enough. We'll take it from here. Dalton was cuffed moments later, shouting about misunderstandings and loyalty. Jack just stood there, exhausted, watching as the past year of fear unraveled into truth. By nightfall, the FBI uncovered 6 more children hidden across the mountains, all linked to the same trafficking network. Rex was airlifted to a veterinary hospital in Helena. The surgeon later said it was close, but he'd live. When the reporters came days later, Jack wanted no part of it. Emily stood beside him on her porch, the snow melting in weak sunlight. They're calling you a hero, she said quietly. Jack looked at the horizon. Heroes don't bleed this much. She smiled softly. Maybe that's what makes them real. A year had passed since that winter night. Montana was no longer white and cold, but green and alive. The valley where snow once buried everything now bloomed with wildflowers, stretching as far as the mountains would allow. Jack Turner stood on the porch of his new cabin, sunlight washing over the fresh cedar walls that smelled of hope more than wood. It wasn't the cabin he once hid from the world in. This one had been built by hands other than his own. The townspeople had come together, some with lumber, some with nails, some just with quiet gratitude. They'd called it a gift. To Jack, it was redemption made of timber and kindness. Rex trotted beside him, the old German shepherd slower now, but still proud. His once black fur had grayed around the muzzle, and a faint scar marked his healed shoulder. His eyes, amber and steady, held the same loyalty that had carried Jack through war and darkness alike. Jack crouched, rubbing behind his ears. You did good, old boy, he murmured. Rex's tail thumped once against the porch, his way of agreeing. Inside the cabin, laughter spilled from the kitchen. Mia Turner, now officially his daughter, was stirring pancake batter with the same determination she once used to conquer nightmares. Her golden hair was neatly brushed, falling past her shoulders, and her blue eyes, once shadowed by fear, now shone with mischief and joy. At 9 years old, she had learned to smile again. You're burning the pancakes, kid, Jack said, stepping in. No, I'm not, she protested, though the smell said otherwise. At the table sat Ben Hayes, Emily's son, a boy of 11 with sandy hair and freckles scattered across his nose. He had a natural curiosity and the easy confidence of someone raised by love. Told you to use lower heat, he teased. Told you to mind your own pancakes, Mia shot back. Jack grinned. It felt like a home, messy, loud, alive. Then Emily walked in, carrying a tray of fresh fruit. She wore a light blue dress that caught the sunlight through the window, her chestnut hair loose for once, brushing her shoulders. There was something soft and calm about her presence, but also unshakable strength. She had that quiet kind of beauty that didn't fade when the conversation stopped. Breakfast ready? She asked with a knowing smile. Almost, Jack said. Mia's conducting culinary experiments again. Emily laughed. As long as no one loses an eyebrow this time. They sat together, a strange little family built from pieces that shouldn't have fit but somehow did. The sound of forks, laughter, and the occasional bark filled the morning. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt peace without having to earn it. Later that week, Jack received an envelope from the local elementary school. Inside was an invitation, handwritten by Emily, who now served as vice principal. They wanted him to speak at the annual Courage and Kindness Assembly. Jack had almost declined, but Mia had insisted. "You have to go," she said, eyes bright. "You always tell me bravery means showing up." So he did. The school gym buzzed with chatter as rows of children in bright clothes filled the seats. Banners hung across the walls. Courage, compassion, community. Jack stood behind the podium, uncomfortable in his clean flannel shirt and old boots. Public speaking had never been his thing. Emily stood at the edge of the stage, giving him that quiet nod that said, "You've got this." Mia sat in the front row, clutching a paper she'd written herself. Jack cleared his throat. "I used to think courage was about strength," he began, voice low but steady. "About fighting and surviving. But it's not. Courage is showing up even when you're scared. It's choosing to keep going when everything tells you to stop. Sometimes, it's just holding on until the sun comes up." He paused, glancing at Mia. "I learned that from a little girl braver than most soldiers I've known." When he finished, the gym erupted in applause. But it was Mia who stole the moment. She climbed the steps to the microphone, hands trembling but smile radiant. "My dad says heroes aren't the strongest," she said, reading from her paper. "They're the ones who don't give up, even when it hurts." The room fell silent, her small voice echoing like a prayer. Emily blinked back tears. Jack felt something he hadn't in years, pride without pain. That afternoon, they drove out beyond the edge of town to where the Iron Creek Memorial Garden had been built. It was a quiet place, a path of stones, a small pond, and a bronze statue of a German shepherd standing beside a soldier. At the base, a plaque read, "Courage doesn't end. Dung kam hong bao gio tan." Jack knelt beside the monument, tracing the engraving with his fingers. Rex sat beside him, tail sweeping gently against the grass. Mia placed a single wildflower between the stones. Ben stood beside her, solemn and still. Emily rested her hand on Jack's shoulder. For a long time, no one spoke. The wind carried the scent of pine and water. The sun broke through the clouds, casting gold across the valley. Jack rose slowly, watching Mia chase Rex down the trail, their laughter echoing through the open field. Emily stepped beside him. "You think you'll ever leave Montana?" she asked softly. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, this is home, for all of us." They walked together down the sunlit path, Rex trotting ahead, Mia and Ben running in circles around him. Behind them, the words on the bronze plaque caught the light like fire. Courage doesn't end. And for the first time, Jack believed it. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light. They come quietly, through a loyal dog, a child's laughter, a stranger's kindness, or the courage of a broken man who refuses to give up. Jack Turner's story isn't just about survival. It's about redemption, about finding light again when the world seems buried in snow. Maybe that's how God works, not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people who choose love over fear. Every act of compassion, every choice to forgive, every moment we keep walking, even when it hurts, is a whisper of His grace. So, if you're watching this tonight, remember, faith doesn't always move mountains. Sometimes it just helps you keep climbing. Hold on to hope, love fiercely, and never forget, courage doesn't end. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Leave a comment about what courage means to you. And if you believe in the quiet miracles that God sends through people and animals alike, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us in spreading light to others. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide you through every storm, just as He guided Jack, Mia, and Rex toward the dawn.